Welcome, weary hero! Come in and pull up a chair by the fireplace. Grab and enjoy a tankard or two of your favorite brew. Listen to your fellow Nephalem trade stories of their journeys throughout Sanctuary. Welcome, hero, to the Scythe and Shield.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first guest show. Today, our first guest of the show is the Protector of Sanctuary, the Keeper of Lore, and no, folks, he is not a paid actor. Neinball, how are you?
Oh, hi. Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on in the inaugural episode.
Yes. As we were just discussing, special honor and also victim to the firing squad, so to speak, for me getting used to this all over again after all these years. But it's great to have you on. You were quite literally the first person I thought of, because I'm like, yeah. Aw, you're adorable. Anyways, so how have things been in life? I know that's a very loaded question.
Particularly, it's funny. Particularly just this week that the nature of my job, is kind of stressful, but this week has been extra stressful. So, yeah. How much do you want me to start this off with just complaining? I'll keep it short and sweet.
It's like I would say a bridge version, but even the bridge version is like a small Encyclopedia Britannica at this point.
Yeah, so it's I work in the theater industry. I'm the operations technician, which involves a lot of booth and projector work, and kind of like the central brain. For those in the know, the LMS or TMS, the theater management system, has gone kaput at one of the two locations that I manage, and very large portion of this week was dedicated to trying getting the OS RAID back up and running, and so now the RAID is functioning on just a single hard drive that has smart failures. So it has the system itself has detected that it is having physical mechanical issues and is going to go bad sometime in the near future. Whether that's 6 months or 6 hours, no idea. And so it's pretty much going through and monitoring it very closely, checking on it every single day, and making sure that it is in fact still functioning, still doing its job. When I went in today for just a couple hours to go through and check on it, it's already beginning to have just process failures. Thankfully, it's still
holding.
It's holding. It's still transferring content. It's still making playlist schedules. Because otherwise, for a 16-screen theater, manually having to make all of those schedules is going to be a very, very tedious process. I just needed, and then also rebuilding the RAID itself. I hope that the drive stays intact until I get the replacement parts in, because otherwise it's going to be re-imaging it and then a whole lot of reconfiguring.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of you for bridging it, because we were going back and forth last night. I'm like, okay, I'm barely understanding what's going on. All I know is HDD disk. Sectors going bad.
Hard drives have failed. Things are screwed. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm like, yeah, I remember when that happened to my laptop, and then the first computer after my laptop, and I'm going like, yeah, that's how I lost all my Counter-Strike maps I made. Like, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it's like one of those. It's a simple RAID array. It's just a 2-drive RAID, and it's just it's for redundancy purposes. Obviously, if it wanted the content array is I forget what RAID configuration the content array is, but it's like 12 hard drives. So wow. that one is for like a ton of redundancy. But with the simple, just the operating system, they just have the 2 drives in there, just in case one were to fail, and both happen to fail at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I can't say Well, I can't say this week has been that active, for better or worse, for myself. It is this was the first week that, knock on wood, IKEA, particle board, but it survived 3 moves and I'm still using it, so I'll still knock on it.
Yeah.
Was the first week that neither my wife nor my kid had to go to the hospital, so yay!
Yeah, always a pleasant thing, isn't it?
I know, it's like, oh, it's great. So yeah, our kid is finally a regular baby. She's a pig. So she's eating everything we're giving her, so that's always a good thing.
She's got a couple weeks to make up for there.
Oh yeah, she's making up for leaps and bounds. And but also, like, the better thing is, like, she's smiling more often now. She's actually like all the babies you like see everywhere, like, just smiling and being just wondering at the world. So that's always a nice thing. Alyssa and I finally began to de-stress from the multiple weeks of things going on. And also, she's actually sleeping longer now. Like, whereas before the hospital and all the visits, like, maybe get 3 hours sleeps out of her. Now, especially with we're going down to less bottles. I'm sorry, everyone. Of course, it's the first episode, and I go immediately into dad talk. It just happens. Get used to it. But since we're giving her less bottles, she's actually able to, we're not under the gun to give her more feed. So we actually let her sleep like 4 or 5 hours. So now my wife can get more sleep during the night. So I don't have to be up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for the switch off type deal. So it's glorious.
Yeah.
She gets more sleep. I get more sleep. We're not zombies during the day. Haven't really been able to play the game that much. I think I played a little bit last Friday with Shepherd and Knight, and for those who are more akin to watching the Westmarch Workshop, I've mentioned their names before. They're basically, along with Line Star, we're like the 4 Musketeers. It's like we play the weekend and the week after of season start, and then immediately schedules start breaking down. But we always have that seasonal start, and we always do pretty good, and we always have that. So that's always been fun, and I think we're at the point where we're all just waiting. What's the next seasonal theme going to be? We're 6 weeks in. We're bored. It's sad that it happens, but it does. So hopefully soon, not TM, will figure that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we'll talk about this on the show, but they did say they were trying to go for the 3 month seasons. In just a couple days from this recording would be the 3 months.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Hopefully that happens, and then first episode have egg on our face. Like, how did we not know? Like, well, that's the magic of podcasting, and I guess deterrent state. But all right, so let's not dawdle. Let's do the dirty thing. Let's move into the first segment.
Hail Nephalem.
Those bumpers. If those playing the home game, the guests can't hear them. They'll hear them when you hear them, the listener.
It's not even that I can't hear them. They're not even there.
Yeah.
Just for 100% clarity.
Yeah. This is all a post job. I'm not gonna mention it again. This is like blooper, but within the show.
I'm
You're
tearing
welcome.
the curtain back before you even have a chance to put it up.
Anyways, so this segment is where we, as I've always said, and I rather like the phrase, is we take the battle tag and we kind of take a crowbar to it. We bash it up a little bit, peek underneath it, see what lies underneath, all the ooey gooey parts. So, Neinball, first question: where does that name come from?
Well, this one, if you've been following any of the work that I've done, or my show, the Westmarch Workshop and such, you might know the answer to this one already. For those that don't, this goes all the way back to the lofty yesteryear of 1997. And there's a little game that came out. Now, most people, when they think of games from 1997, are going to go to Final Fantasy VII, but my game was Armored Core. And the main antagonist in that game was Neinball. Though, just spelled 9, not 9. And was a badass character that you like as you play through the game, hear all these great things about. So hard to get above him in like the arena rankings and such when you're battling through the Raven's Nest. But was just like kind of like the awesome silent antagonist. And when I was going around on like little message boards and stuff like that, it was everyone there was all some iteration of Neinball or something along those lines. And so I thought it would be cool because it didn't say anybody else make the name, was Neinball. Just because phonetically it worked, and it just kind of stuck with me ever since. So yeah, I've had that moniker for a good like 20 years now.
Wow.
I really haven't deviated from it. There's not a lot of other people that are clamoring for that name, so it's relatively easy to get for any new game or social service or anything like that. And it usually, if anybody notices the name, without of course like knowing who I am, like when I'm just like queuing into a game, it's always one of two reactions. Oh, do you play pool? Because 9-ball pool is the thing. Or dude, I loved Armored Core, and it was like, those are beautiful moments. Those are very beautiful moments.
Very cool. All right, so the next question on the list is, how old are you, and what's your profession or work or study? Any and all above.
I'm getting the appropriate time frame for having a midlife crisis, because I'll be turning 35 next month. Ooh. And as I was mentioning in the beginning of the show, I am operations technician for a movie theater here in South Florida, and that pretty much is a roundabout way of saying I'm a work bitch. I don't know your feelings on cursing on the show or anything like that, but
it's going to be explicit on iTunes, so don't worry. So basically, you're like a higher paid salary gopher.
More or less, I do a little bit of everything. The main priority is keeping the projectors up and running and making sure that the audio video quality is acceptable, at a high level of service. Then from there, it's making sure we have one of the theaters has reclining seats, so making sure that the motors are working, the frames aren't bent, making sure that any chips in the wall paint are taken care of. So you glue it. What are just some of the other stuff that I've done this past week? I've glued down carpet squares. I've repainted walls. I've repainted doors. I've tried to rewire a ballast on a fluorescent light that's tied into the emergency lighting system. So I've got to cut like power to the building. So I can't. I gotta have to do like an overnight in order to try and finish up that one. Just like lens corrections, correcting the screen files, and even just like I repaired a popper, going through and like blowing out some of the motors, and then like wiping down like windows and port windows and stuff like that. It's a bit of everything. And then of course the unfortunate side effect is, because I have experience with computers, the IT department loves to also go through and shift other things onto me. So it's just it's like, hey Whitney, can you go through and take a look at this kiosk, or can you go through and see why this concessions terminal isn't working? Can you troubleshoot this phone? Can you troubleshoot that iPad at the restaurant? All this other stuff just eventually all gets piled in on.
Yep. So to say everything and anything, man, is actually a little inadequate to say the least.
Oh yeah, I ingest the movies. I I make sure that the lenses are in focus, that the 3D is playing properly, and I unclog toilets. That's my job.
Yep. From the high chair to taking care of a shitter.
Pretty
everything
much.
And anything.
I got a seat at the high table, and I'm taking out the trash afterwards. So.
You're cleaning up your own $100 steak. Love it.
More or less.
All right. So now we start moving over into the more appropriate franchise questions. What was your first time seeing Diablo? And was it due to a particular person at that time?
Ooh. That's an interesting question. I don't think that I've ever actually shared that one. Where I have talked about my first experience with Diablo was actually a negative one, because this is going back to like 1997 again. That's a convergence. That's
Party
like
it's 1997.
Yeah, that's like a convergence year for me. It's beginning to shape up. But it was actually, I played Diablo on the PS1. I had I had a old hand-me-down like Packard Bell that I was using, so it really couldn't run any like non-DOS based game. So it was older PC. And so the majority of my gaming was all console stuff. And also at that time, my mom would have freaked, if I had asked her to buy me a game like Diablo. It was at a friend of mine's house. His name was Billy, and it was his neighbor Joey had rented the game Diablo and brought it over because I had for Command and Conquer Red Alert, I had actually bought like the iLink hub, so that way you could connect multiple PS1s together to do like multiplayer. So because it
console land back in those days.
It was an amazing time, and he was just like, "Oh, well, since you have that, why don't I bring over my PlayStation? We'll play at Billy's house, and we could do this multiplayer of this game that I rented." And it's like, sure, okay. Played it, hated it. It was like, this is wonky, this is bad, I don't like it. Like, can't we just go back and like play some Red Alert, or something like that? And that was kind of the end of it. I didn't really look back at that too much. But yeah, that was my first time, playing Diablo, and it was more or less because of my friend from school, Billy, which oddly enough, still hang out with every once in a while. That kind of gave me my first touch on Diablo. But as you can tell, that isn't what got me hooked into the Diablo franchise itself.
Mm-hmm. So, actually, let's actually work off that, like old therapist style. What actually got you hooked in the Diablo franchise?
The game that had gotten me hooked into Blizzard was actually StarCraft, and that was fast forward a couple of years. In high school, I think it was 2000. It was 1999 or 2000. It was in one of my computer. It was like in one of my computer classes. Someone had installed a cloner of StarCraft in the computer lab, and so when we had extra time, we were allowed to play computer games. And also sometimes when we weren't supposed to be playing computer games, we loaded it up anyways.
Of course.
Yeah, and so we started playing StarCraft, and it was just like, wow, this game is amazing. Like, this is like one of the greatest games I've ever played. I absolutely loved it. Fell in love with it, all that stuff. And then a couple more years go by. I'm finishing up my last year of high school in Europe, and when I get back, like a friend of mine had just picked up Lord of Destruction. Like, Lord of Destruction had just come out, and he was going through playing it. I was over at his place, and I was like watching him play. I was like, "Oh, that looks kind of cool." It's like, "Oh yeah, this is Diablo 2." I was like, I remember playing that game and like not really liking it. It's like, well, when did you play it? It's like a while ago. It's like on the PlayStation. It's like, oh, that's Diablo, not Diablo 2. You should try it out. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, this looks kind of fun. So when I go home, I've got a slightly better computer now. I download the free demo, which is basically just the it maxes at the cold plains and killing Bloodraven is as far as you can get. You can only play the Barbarian. But I played that demo, I think probably like all night long. Literally until like the next morning when I could actually go out, to the Best Buy and pick up a copy of the game, on my own. And that was also one of those interesting ones where it's like when my mom found out I bought it, she like prayed outside my room for like 3 hours.
The towels at the foot of the door, kneeling. There's like there's a candle. It's like, for being awfully Christian and praying for your soul, is like, this is becoming awfully dark all of a sudden. Like, we're
but that is what basically it's like when I played that demo for Diablo 2. It's like, okay, now I might have had a bad experience with that first game, but now this is different. Like, it was Diablo 2. And I didn't really play.
This is that good demon shit, not that bad demon shit.
I didn't really have the experience of the Diablo 2 classic because I went straight in with Lord of Destruction. I did later go back and like play like a ladder reset on the classic for a little bit, but I have to say, Lord of Destruction was definitely far more of my liking of the game, and that that got me hooked. That was like one of those ones where it's like Diablo 2 is like one of those, for as much as like StarCraft was just like world altering for me, like Diablo 2 became that. Like the only reason I ever got into playing World of Warcraft was it was the guys that made Diablo 2, even though I later began to realize there was a difference between Blizzard and Blizzard North. It wasn't literally the same guys. But like, oh wow, this game uses the talent tree system like Diablo 2 does. I'll give it a try. It's like, I got addicted to that game too and all that. But yeah, it was Diablo 2 was that one that was just like really like I just stayed up for 40 hours playing a video game and I didn't even realize it, type thing.
Yeah. And actually, to just kind of piggyback what you said, very briefly, I was actually the same way with StarCraft. StarCraft was my gateway drug of choice in the Blizzard games. I actually have to give my eldest cousin a lot of credit because he got me into like SimCity 2000 back in the day, and he got me into StarCraft, which was the entry into Blizzard games. And just and even though I never played a Final Fantasy game at all, I have actually seen. I still watched him play it. Like since he was the eldest, he knew the most about game, and I just watched him play games a lot, and it just looked so cool. So I think I was like 98 when I got StarCraft. And because I was correct me if I'm wrong. Brood came out in 96. Or was that StarCraft?
No, StarCraft itself, I believe, came out in 98, and Brood War came out in 99.
Oh, okay, so it must have been like 2000, similar to you, like a couple years after the fact.
Yeah,
because I remember
Diablo. Yeah, Diablo 1 was 96. December 31st, 1996. So it was practically 97.
Asterisk.
And then StarCraft came out 98. Brood War 99, I believe. And then Diablo 2, 2000, Lord of Destruction 2001.
Okay, so that must have been like 2000 because I remember getting both games at the same time, and then just rummaging through the campaign. And I still say StarCraft is one of those weird games. Like it is so like galactically big, but it focuses on like a dozen characters really, really well, and that's what hooked me. Going through the in-game manual with all of Chris Menson's artwork and just the descriptions, like the brood sizes and what they were specialized in, and the brood lords and the cerebrits that controlled them all, like all that stuff. That was amazing.
That's actually one of those things, like the early days with those manuals, especially like going through in, I think it was probably a year or two before I ever really even looked into the Diablo 2 manual, because when I bought it, it was the battle chest that also came with the Prima guide inside of it. And so I read that instead of the manual for all like the secrets and tips. And like by the time that I even gotten it, like half the information in it was already outdated, and like nothing in it applies now.
Rip the WoW version when that came out. I was like, patch 1 point something, like everything changes.
I was going through the Ariat Summit, the info website for Diablo 2, and I was looking at some stuff for the Necromancer, and I think it was like I clicked on like the character page, and it was going through, it was calling them the Priest of Rathma, and I'm like, where the hell is this coming from? And so I went back into the manual and found that, oh wow, there's actually there's a lot of story that isn't in this game, and I started reading through all of it, and it's like, well, this shit's hardcore, like this is amazing. And then so it's like I fell even more in love with the game once I found out that there was actually even a greater story, because I love the kind of the story that they laid out and those the cinematic cutscenes and all that stuff. This is back in the day. Watching it nowadays, it's obviously, I think it's aged better than a lot of other things of its time. But at the time, like that was end all be all in terms of cinematic achievement, like as far as cinematics within a video game. And it's just like finding that there was even more layers to the story just had me hooked, and it's now one of my favorite aspects of the game, or the franchise, I should say.
Yeah. And going down this rabbit hole a little bit more, you kind of snuck it in there, so let's just.
I am good at segues, man.
Yeah. Swing. No. So you mentioned about finishing high school over in Europe. So,
Mhm.
however much you want to talk about that, like that experience and how that was, and a little bit you want to talk about that life experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those ones that's kind of interesting. Um, it was kind of me ending up over there was because of just some like family issues and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't like an exchange program or anything like that. So I ended up having to go through and live with kind of like my next to family, which were all over in the Netherlands, and so that's
Okay.
what it kind of ended up being. Me going over there for a year to basically, finish up my last year of high school. So I went to a British school and finished up, the secondary education program over there. And yeah, no, it was interesting. It was in the Netherlands. Everyone spoke English, so I barely learned any Dutch. Whenever I tried to like, sputter out a very poor sentence in Dutch, it was always just met with Engels. Like, yeah. And so they would just talk to me in English. They take pity on me. But it was a fun time. It was just kind of eye opening. Getting to experience other cultures, other places in the world. It was a nice experience.
Great to hear. All right, so going back to the questions, detangenting, co-signing, signing, whatever you want to call it. What got you involved in the community work? Now, I guess if you want to answer just strictly with Diablo, or if you did anything prior to that, like what made you take that leap essentially from being just playing the game to supporting the game?
It was one of those. It was around the time that all the big rumors for Diablo 3 was beginning to start. Like Diablo fans was actually Diablo3.com.
Yeah.
And that I started getting involved in the communities over there because it's like, oh, there's some like actual like credible rumors that like D3 is being made right now. It's like, well, I love 2 so much that I kind of want to get on the ground level of this, and so I was just trying to be a little bit active in the forums, the comments on the posts. At this point in time, for like game news, it was like IGN was out there, and everything else was fan sites. The majority of information that you would get about the game was fan sites. Blizzard communicated with those websites in order to try and push out information and such, and that was how you got your news. There wasn't really a whole big games media behind it. That was still kind of like your print era, like your Game Pro, Game Informer, and all those other things.
GameSpot, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then of course, 2008, they announced Diablo 3. Everything is like huge. Everything's big. The whole color and rainbow controversy, which just never died, was started. And I think it was 2011 over on Diablo Inc. Gamers. I believe that the name, it had started off as DiabloIHI.net, which it has now gone back to. But at the time, it had been switched over to Diablo.Inc. Gamers. It was active on that forum and that community over there, speculating about D3, talking about Diablo 2, and Flux, who at the time, was the site manager and kind of like the I want to say the news guy, but the only one writing news on the website, was starting up a podcast. And for the inaugural episode, wanted to talk to people about BlizzCon because it was going into, is this kind of going to be like the year they're going to finally announce the release date for Diablo 3? Is the game had been announced like 3 years before, and we still didn't have anything. And so it was towards the beginning. It was towards the beginning of 2011. A lot of people that had been to BlizzCon previously that had played the demo and tried to get their experiences and their ideas, and so it was just like, well, I'll throw my hat into the ring and try that out. And so I got on. The first couple episodes was interviews with previous developers of Diablo 2, and then I think it was like episode 3 was the first episode that I was on, to go through and talk about BlizzCon and such. And then I just kind of became a regular on the podcast itself.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a bi-monthly, monthly, like whenever Flux had time to record an episode. There wasn't a real set schedule to it. But I would be on a fair amount of the episodes throughout the course and the run of that show. And just getting to talk about Diablo, speculate about what Diablo 3 might be, or once it launched, my experiences with the game, how it compares to Diablo 2, and from there it was kind of like, well, where can I go to take the next steps? I helped Ezra, who's a big community guy from the beginning of Diablo 3, that ended up falling out of love with the game. And so I helped him for another Diablo in Gamers project with writing on the website there. When that kind of died shortly after the launch of the game, it was just kind of going through, looking around. I just started going through and watching some of the stuff that was getting posted on BlizzPlanet. And eventually when the JR, Heather and them branched off of BlizzPlanet to make their own BlizzPro, that's when I kind of like jumped at the chance. Well, hey, I like a lot of the Blizzard franchises. I like the work that you guys have done. Would like to go through and join the team. And there wasn't a lot really at the time that was going on Diablo 3. It was at a very low point. There was by then they had like the monster power system and the level 100 Paragon, like the Nephalem Valor and all that other stuff.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. But there wasn't really all that much that was going on besides most of the game was, I'm just gonna flip the auction house and I'm gonna level up a character on monster power 10 until I get to Paragon level 100, max out my magic find, and then now I'm gonna go through and try and get another character because I've maxed out magic find to try and find more items, but I feel as if I'm missing out because I'm not gaining experience on a character anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like conflicting play goals that you had there. And so I was writing a little bit about World of Warcraft, a little bit about StarCraft, and I think I had joined like just a couple months before we started having the teaser images for Reaper of Souls. That was the countdown to Gamescom, and from there it was just took the reins, started hitting up a whole bunch of stuff, speculating about Diablo 3. This is going through the prophecy of the end times. The next bad guy has to be Malthael. It's going to take place in Pandemonium. Maybe it's going to have the World Stone and all this other type of stuff. I actually was pretty accurate with a lot of my predictions when they went through and finally announced the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then just going from there, and it's, well, how far do you want me to talk on this one?
No, that's good as it is, because before that good old question that's next is it actually is good because that's kind of like sums up like where you started and then how you came to be a Blizz Pro and everything. Mm-hmm. But now that you've taken in the reins of the Westmarch Workshop Podcast for it's been 5 years now.
Yeah, the inaugural episode, I've said inaugural like a whole bunch in this podcast. So the first episode of the Westmarch Workshop was a week after Reaper of Souls is launched. And so whenever Reaper of Souls has its anniversary, Westmarch Workshop is just the next week. Yeah. Makes it easy for me to remember.
Yeah, someone has to. who better than you?
And then I guess at this point, like, there's no one else. It has to be me. Well, that Longshot will remember for me.
Oh, he's weird. He's like the you of the show. But yeah, so shout out to Longshot if you're listening and everything.
He's going to be listening.
Oh, I hope so, because I'm going to need someone for this show eventually like that. So yeah, so now that we've kind of come up to that point in the history, which is kind of like, I guess you could say where we're going to branch off for a question or two or three is, how did Westmarch Workshop start? Like, I guess like the abridged version of like that story,
so
for those who don't happen to know.
the abridged version of the Westmarch Workshop is at the time like the big thing for BlizzPro was trying to launch a family of YouTube like video podcasts. We had the Twizcast, which was like kind of like a weekly all-encompassing podcast for everything Blizzard. That was run by Twiz, hence the name.
Yes.
And they had different kind of personalities on the show to cover all different topics, of Blizzard, or to just, it wasn't even specifically, that you're only covering World of Warcraft. It was to share their opinions on everything that was happening within the Blizzard sphere of games. And Twiz and JR were talking, and they wanted to push forward this thing called BlizzPro TV. They had a family of other like video podcasts and such that we could build up as like a brand, in kind of like a network. And these talks started shortly after Reaper of Souls, had become announced. And it was like, there are not a lot of Diablo podcasts that are out there. At the time, I believe it was just the Diablo Ain't Gamers podcast, which had started to have a drop in the recording time. Flux had started becoming involved with other aspects, outside of the Diablo community. It was starting to put more and more time and effort into those. There was a Shattered Soulstone podcast, and
Yes.
I believe that the Worldstone Keep podcast had not yet gone defunct at that point, because they kind of like wrapped up shortly before Reaper. They didn't quite make it there. And so it's like that was it. There wasn't anything else. Then of course there's Twizcast that covered Diablo, and they wanted to kind of like have these specialized shows that you could have Twizcast for the generic thing covering everything Blizzard, and then if you wanted to dive deeper into your franchise of choice, well, here's the show for it. One of the people that was on Twizcast was Archon, who was a huge streamer back in the early days of Diablo 3, and because I was the site manager and kind of creating the sole Diablo content, that was on the site at the time, it was like, well, Nine, you've got a little bit of experience podcasting. Archon has got a lot of experience streaming. Why don't you two go through and get a podcast started? And then that kind of like we started talking about it, and we get to November, and it's just, well, BlizzCon is coming up. And there's there's like travel and all this other types of stuff, so we don't really, our schedules aren't aligning. And then there's Thanksgiving, after that, and then we're going into Christmas, and so it was a lot of not being able to get anything together. And then towards the end of December, Monstrous, who's another big Diablo community member, wanted to kind of get into the show as well, but talks kind of went nowhere, like trying to like line up the schedules. And then it was actually at the Reaper of Souls launch party that they had over in LA that I got to meet Archon like face to face. We had met at the previous BlizzCon, but we only talked a little bit about it. But when we were there at the launch party, and we saw like just the pure passion that all of the developers had for this game, and how much they were just pouring their heart and soul into it, that we just kind of like, by the end of the show, we just kind of like looked at each other, and it's like, so we're recording when we get home? And I was like, yeah, that's why it literally launched the next week, because that was like the thing. We can't wait on this. Like this is going to be big. Diablo 3, had a very rough start, and it caused a lot of division within the community that even to this day hasn't really healed or been mended, despite everything. Like, Reaper of Souls fixed like almost all of the core issues with Diablo 3 and made it a wonderful game. And we kind of picked up and realized this as we're sitting there talking to the developers, looking at all the content and such. And that's why we finally nailed it down. It's like, well, we've got to do this show. And now here I am 5 years later.
Yeah
167 episodes. I've got episode 168 to record shortly.
Yeah, I remember that Reaper of Souls launch party, and I remember getting invited and going, oh, I can't spare that expense. So I missed an opportunity to see you guys on the ground level of this thing. But
that was actually
at the time I couldn't.
Oh yeah, that was actually the first time I got to meet Leviathan face to face. Who we had done episodes on the Ink Gamers podcast prior to that, and he was a member of BlizzPro, but at the time was mainly writing about Hearthstone.
Yeah, it's like funny because like everything you talk about with like BlizzPro was like just before my time.
Mm-hmm.
It was like no more than like 6 months before I joined, and it's like kind of cool because it's like it kind of makes me feel like I missed that history, but at least when I came in at the time, experienced some of that grandeur with people coming and going and everything like that. All that fun stuff. So, as we've mentioned before, so we know how Westmarch Workshop started, and we know it's been hosts have come and go, but you've been primarily the torchbearer of the show, keeping it going over these last 5+ years now. So when you look back, this is one of those overarching questions, when you look back on the show and what it's done and what it's accomplished, like not so much like what do you feel most proud about, but what do you feel most proud about?
Trying to think of that one on the fly. I'm not sure. I want to say, in terms of personal pride, one of the things I still look back on is an email that we had. I think this was from, this was like 2 years ago. That someone had emailed us in and said that their friends had all played Diablo 3, but they didn't. And they got him to listen to the show. And he listened to the show for 3 months before he bought the game. Because he just enjoyed the show so much that he went through and got it. And it's like, that's the type of thing that, that gives at least, me a sense of pride of, just being able to instill part of, my own passion, part of Leviathan's own passion into, someone that just coincidentally, picked up the podcast is something, that at least, for me is one of my, like most proud moments.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, like the easy answer is the fact that you can kill me in the game because there's a monster named after me, and that the show has a little nod in the Bane of the Stricken flavor text.
Yes, all the little hints. One day I'll get there. Hopefully, maybe we'll see.
Yep.
I have to earn my keep. I guess
they've got a couple new games, Diablo games coming out. There's plenty of opportunities to go through and have more little Easter eggs.
So I guess this will kind of be like the last question of this segment. Really, it's actually a question that, like, as I'm asking it out, it's so strange. Because when I was asking this question on the original Scythe and Shield, it was right before Rebirth Souls was coming out. And here we are, where most of us, after the last several years with BlizzCon's going, it's going to be this year. It's going to be this year. We think it may be this year. All the hints are pointing this year. But we think actually this year, all the signs are kind of finally there. We're all kind of going, it's this year or bust, so to speak. So I'll ask you just quite simply, what lessons, or actually no, not lessons per se, but what hopes do you have for the franchise going forward?
Well, there are a couple of different things. And the first one that I want to talk about is the knowns, which is at this point Diablo Immortal and Diablo 3. For Diablo 3, it's being handled by a different development team than the one that we know, and that created all the content for Diablo 3, more or less prior to the Season of Greed with the Treasure Goblins. That was Team 3, and then now Diablo 3 is being handled by Classic Games, and that might go through and have you think, well, that's the team that just kind of like babysits the servers for StarCraft and Warcraft 3. a very simplistic way, yes, that's what they are. But they do a lot more than that, as we've obviously seen with the last couple of seasons, the last couple of patches, that they are willing to go through and kind of like dig a little bit deeper into the game and make some changes, do some well, let's buff some set pieces, or let's buff some non-set legendaries to go through and add some varied play styles. Let's shake up the meta a little bit. Let's do some more interesting things than besides just double goblins, for the seasonal themes, in order to go through and make the game a little bit more interesting. Obviously, we're not going to see any expansion level content or things to rival Kanai's Cube, but we're getting a lot more content in support with Diablo 3 now, this far into its life cycle, than we did even like 2 years after Lord of Destruction release. When you look at the actual level of support that we're getting to the games, and that's definitely one thing to Blizzard's credit, that we're getting a lot of love and support. A lot of people like to point out, like, Path of Exile, they're always doing these new and big things, but that's because GGG's only game that they're working on is Path of Exile. Blizzard's primary focus is not Diablo 3. It's the Project Fenris and Diablo Immortal, which now going into the second known as Diablo Immortal, which is a lot of people, of course, it had a very negative reception. I don't believe that the announcement was really handled in the best way. And a lot of people are skeptical because they're partnering with NetEase that it's going to be a pay-to-win game, and those are definitely valid concerns to have, given just mobile in general is considered as like a cash grab. You make your game to take advantage of whales, and if you want to try and actually play the game like free to play, we don't even know what the pay scheme of it is. It's just mobile itself, in the community of PC gamers, which is the majority of your Diablo player base. Mobile has negative connotations, and you have to you have to go above and beyond that in order to win them over. I think Blizzard is going to be able to do that, just with the names that are behind Diablo Immortal, created some of the best systems in mechanics and effects, or boss encounters and such, behind Diablo 3. They've got the talent, they can do it. I'm very interested in seeing where they take the game and what they do. And it's also a great indicator of some of the thought processes that are going on behind the scenes for the unknown, the next step in the franchise. As we learned from the Kotaku article last year, Project Fenris, Diablo 4, Diablo Next, whatever its name is going to actually end up being. But it makes you think, well, if they're kind of going like with Diablo Immortal, they're going like an MMO light type mechanics, and you've got like dungeons and raids, and just you have like these really awesome like inter-skill interactions that makes it seem that these are steps that they could be taking for like the next level ARPG mechanics that could easily port over and build upon for Diablo 4, Diablo Next.
Yeah. Alrighty, so that will conclude this segment. We're going to move over to the next one, which I hope just confuses and breaks you, so I'm just going to say it out loud. So here we go. Next segment.
7 Deadly Sins.
Alrighty, so 7 Deadly Sins is meant to be a quick-fire of questions. You have no prior knowledge of this, so I'm just going to read these questions. Answer quickly. The more you think about it, the more I may kind of veto your answer and may just say you take the other one, alright? So
okay.
So 7 questions, answer as quickly as possible, and then we'll move over to the last segment. Alright, are you ready?
Okay, hit me.
Alright, question number 1. What's more blasphemous, Jar Jar or episodes 7 through 9?
Ooh, 7 through 9.
If you were a necromancer, what creature would you raise for your undead army?
Real or mythical?
Anything.
Shoot, I don't know. Rancors.
Yeah. Which chaos god would you pledge to?
Of Tzeentch.
The Barcelona food truck is not at BlizzCon. What do you do?
Riot.
Diablo 4 is announced and it's glorious. What is your body doing?
Orgasming, can I say that?
Yes. Anything else
Is this
happening?
TVMA? Yeah.
Anything else, or just that? Just like convulsing happily on the ground.
Oh, we'll leave it at orgasming and then let you imagine what else is happening.
Okay.
We'll leave it to your imagination, and it's in your head now.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm just I'm imagining the pic on your Twitter header, but as like the starting point for all of that. Yes. All right. Next question. Yes or no? Name of first child or co-op pet with a girlfriend. Is it Ogchild?
No.
All right. Last question.
It's gonna be an Evangelion reference if you want to know more.
No, I don't. All right. Last question. Ash versus Arnold. Terminator Arnold, for reference. Who wins?
Ash.
Okay. And there you go. Get some weird questions and some potentially weirder answers.
I like that. I definitely like that.
On this segment. All right. Now we're going to move over to the last one for more game related. And here we go.
Hear ye, read all about it. The Burning Times.
All right, now the Burning Times, as is kind of alluded to in the title segment of itself, is where I give the guest the opportunity to come to a show with a topic they feel isn't talked about enough. It's like everyone's complaining about the game, but the guest is like, no, like this shining little piece needs more attention, or complete be something completely different. So I encourage the guests to come with a topic. If they don't have one, I have one waiting in the wings, so to speak, to cover. So is there a particular topic or subject that you feel the community needs just to like know this about, or are we going to delve into the topic I discuss?
I'm kind of interested in knowing the topic that you want to discuss.
Well, mine's of course going to be circling around lore, so, because
Gotcha.
you're that guy, but
of course.
All right, so we're gonna go.
It's either that or the topic that I would like to discuss is immortal. And so, do you want your second episode to be immortal? You piss off everybody.
See, I want to discuss immortal because all right, let's try to do both because I don't have a strict timeline for how long the show is gonna be. So, all right, let's do immortal first because I have vested interest in this, so to speak. So I guess since you brought it up, I'll let you start because, like I said, this is the guest time to bring something up. So I'll piggyback off anything I feel vested in one way or another. But I'll let you start with your feelings on immortal and everything else. And if I need to cut in or something, I'll try to politely raise. Well, I can't raise my hand because you don't see me. I'll try to cut in as nicely as I can. So, but I'll let you start. All right. You have the floor.
Yeah. I'm speaking from a position of privilege because, I've played the game. I've had a hands-on experience, with the game that not a lot of other people are going to be able to, speak from that point of view. So I have to understand, when I'm creating content or I'm writing articles, that what the majority of the community that's going through and reading, all they have to go on is the negative reactions from the rest of the community and nothing else to base their opinions off of. They don't have anything. I can say, hey, the game was a lot of fun, but at that point, as just like a community personality, am I biased? Some of the developers. Is that bias clouding your judgment? And those are going to be fair assertions. But I can say, from as unbiased as I can be, that the game itself, was fun. And I feel that because of the overall reaction, not so much to the game, but to how the game itself was announced, going through and saying, hey, like the next title in this franchise that you love so much about is on a completely different platform, because the vast majority of Diablo players, even though the game is on consoles, the vast majority are PC players. To not have something like in the wings, to announce or discuss, for those people that are still playing Diablo 3, was obviously a letdown. Even though before BlizzCon they did say, hey, we know what you want, Diablo 4, but we're not going to announce that just yet. We've got a lot of other projects, that we're going through and working on. I think if they had just acknowledged the fact that they were not going to announce Diablo 4, like specifically word it, we're not going to announce Diablo 4 at BlizzCon, I think that would have been a much better job at managing expectations, for the game, which is really what all of the controversy around Immortal is coming from, is expectation. And now it's just a meme at this point. That is just going to continue on, and it's something that the launch of the game is going to have to contend with. I don't think that, when the game itself comes out, the majority of people that are going to be downloading it are probably have never even going to heard of the phone meme joke. That's just something that's kind of core within like the Diablo PC audience, and this game itself is going to be huge. And so it's one of those ones where I really wish that people would have like an open mind when they go through and they allow discussions of Diablo Immortal to take place. Because anywhere that you see the topic of Immortal go through and come up, and people might actually be trying to discuss it, it's just that, well, do you not have phones? Is this an off-season April Fool's Day joke?
It just creators.
Yeah, it shuts down any attempt at having a conversation about the game. That even people like that have legitimate concerns about like the monetization and such get drowned out, by just like the memes. And I think that is one of those ones that at this point the community has to kind of accept that if we want to have discussions about it, we have to rein it back. But at the same time, there's nothing to discuss. Blizzard has been, radio silence, on anything Immortal related at all. So there's not been anything new to discuss. All the other topics have been kind of drilled down 100 times. And so really all that's left to talk about with Immortal at the moment is the memes.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you pointed out, like, I definitely agree with. It's just, I guess just to abridge a couple of points, is I remember being on the Westmarch Workshop with Leviathan and yourself, we were talking about like what were our expectations for Diablo at BlizzCon, and at that show I was more in the Diablo 4 camp than anything else. Maybe a DLC. An expansion never really made sense because it would have been being built on an engine that was anywhere between a decade to a decade plus old at that point. And it would have required like a new engine, like it would have been like a new game just to do an expansion, like overkill for an expansion's level with a work. And some people will disagree, but like everyone points out the 3 lines we got from the video. It was multiple teams, multiple projects, and then it was some will take longer than others and all this stuff. But the last line in there that everyone seemed to forget, and again, like our community, our Diablo 3 community, that is so tight that I think we almost parrot each other to some extent. Because like if Riker says something, or Blood says something, or Big Daddy Dan says something, like those I consider like the big 3 pillars of the current community, as the current Diablo 3 community as it stands right now. Like they're there. I mean, if Quinn comes back, he annihilates them all, but it's Quinn. But he's not consistent in the game, so I don't consider him a pillar. Like, stick with it, and it's up and it's down, so to speak. That's my attitude.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like some of like the largest Diablo 3 streamers, like Quinn and Datmods. Whenever they go back and they start playing Diablo again, they're not necessarily all of a sudden taking from the other Diablo community and content creators. They're bringing their own specific communities to Diablo.
And
So that's,
and they played the game in the past. That's why I don't want this to be like a criticism of them. I mean, they're full-time streamers. They got to follow the money. They got to do what they got to do.
and that's actually, you know, regards to Immortal, that was one of the fairest criticisms I saw. I think it was actually like Big Daddy Din and Riker that were really big on that. It's like, well, as a content creator, how do I monetize content creation for like a mobile game? Like how do I even do this? How do I go about creating like YouTube videos?
Like capture with weird ass capture cards and shit like that. Like
it's like, you know, and that's one of those things that you didn't really have for a game that, you know, you might have announced 11 years ago, like, you know, the original Diablo 3. It's like that now it's no longer fan sites, it's like YouTube videos and streamers is where you get a lot of your information and reviews about games. And so the whole environment has completely changed, and so you need to be able to, you know, make sure that you can, you know, create content that people are going to willing to, you know, subscribe to your Twitch channel or support you on Patreon. You know, because there's been so many ad apocalypse, you can't go off of just you know, video views or, you know, clicks or affiliate links or anything like that. You know, you're looking to create content that people want, and when you have such a huge negative reaction where the community is just like, I don't want this, you know, what does that make it look like to you? Especially like Big Daddy Din, who is exclusively like Diablo, you know, for what, 6-7 years now?
6+ years now.
And that when you go through and it's like, well, the kind of like the next thing that you announce is something that he doesn't really have any interest in playing. You know, well, am I going to have to do that if I want to continue to create content for Diablo? Like, how long do I have to wait?
It almost comes like, do I kind of? It becomes. I mean, Immortal is not. It's not that case, but the traditional paradox of follow the money or stay true to your core, where you came from, essentially.
And that's also one of those other ones that, you know, I don't really think that maybe gets a lot of discussion is, you know, where is that then put back on the developer? Because now you have people that depend upon you for their living, you know.
Yeah, and like how much it does or doesn't get factored in.
Yeah, is there any type of moral responsibility on them? I mean, probably not. But it still is one of those things that, like, those decisions and stuff like that have great ramifications that go well beyond just a negatively received game or a poor Metacritic score or something along those lines. You know, it's created a very interesting look at things of how the video game community itself is, or I guess more how the review news cycle thing, because, you know, most video game developers nowadays, you know, it's they'll go with like the big channel, Forbes, IGN, and then, well, let's go through and give like a sponsored stream, you know, with like the biggest Twitch streamer, and that's like their marketing budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it does, because like I was saying prior to that fourth line was, and we'll have something to show you later on. And at that particular point, there were only two major conventions left. It was Gamescom or BlizzCon. And my feeling was it was not going to be Gamescom, because Diablo 3 was at the Worldwide Invitational and Rebirthed Souls was at Gamescom. It was like, bring the big D back to BlizzCon in like the modern era. Like, bring it back for the announcement, make it big, make it like celebratory. Give us our panels, give us the demo, and all the other secondary stuff was lining up. There, like the Book of Adria, which was kind of following in line with the Book of Tyrael and the Book of Cain. And then there was going to be the 4-part comic book series that was announced but canceled now. But that was similar to with Diablo 3. There was a 5-part comic book where I think the first 4 came out before and the 5th one came out afterwards. And even though Rebirthed Souls didn't have a comic book release, if I remember correctly, it had a short story that was available on the website as a PDF. I forget if that was shortly before or shortly after Rebirthed Souls release. I know.
There were a string of short stories that were released for Rebirthed Souls.
Okay.
They did a whole bunch of short stories for Diablo 3, a whole bunch of short stories for Rebirthed Souls. And then there was also the novel tie-in.
The novel tie-in. So, like, all the signs were there, and I say signs because we were able to backtrack them. It's like, okay, they have a Book of Adria, they had a Book of Tyrael, Book of Cain, check, check, check. They had comic books, they have comic books, check, check. They were making this pseudo announcement, like an announcement of an announcement, which is what Blizzard is so good at doing, and it just pisses us off because it's like it means something and yet absolutely nothing at the same time. So I was like, check, check. And that's why I felt so strongly that we were going to Diablo 4, and then, you know, we go there, Immortal is shown, and then it just spirals into this where the community almost keels over within the months after. And I think, like, my 2020 hindsight, like the last month or so, because I still think about that BlizzCon. I still think about how we as a community reacted, and part of me still wants to put more blame on the community itself, because reaction, like, you could only react to something. Like in life, you could only react to things, and you can choose how those reactions happen. Yeah, it sucks that things that happen that cause you to have those reactions, but it's like you are your own person. You are responsible for how you carry yourself, you react, and move forward. And even if that reaction is, I don't like what's going on, I'm leaving Blizzard, I'm leaving Diablo, that's fine.
That's one of those ones where it's, I have had some conversations with, you know, other people, even like recently, that are like legitimately upset by Immortal, and they think that Immortal is the reason, you know, like why, you know, we are not getting seasons fast enough in Diablo 3, or that they missed the Diablo 4 announcement was because they put so much emphasis on Immortal. And it's just a lot of these things that, you know, when you understand more about game design, and this is not even just like, you know, trying to understand more about like Blizzard's game design, but just game design in general. Like they're completely different development teams with their own development budgets. And, you know,
it's all like
production schedules and timelines. There's practically no overlap, you know, whatsoever, besides they all share the name Diablo, and they might have, you know, like the same person, like Alan Adham might be checking off, you know, everything on what's going through and being developed, because he was kind of like one of the big public faces for Immortal itself. And he was the one that, you know, pinned the article to rein back the expectations right before BlizzCon. And, you know, or people that were like all salty that, you know, it's like, oh, you sell BlizzCon as like this big Diablo announcement to sell BlizzCon tickets, and then, you know, you serve us, you know, something that we don't wanted. And it's just like, well, you bought BlizzCon tickets well before they teased that there was going to be a major Diablo announcement at the BlizzCon. So it's like, you know, people love to distort facts, like to make themselves, you know, maybe feel a little bit better. But there's definitely a lot of those things where I can definitely understand, you know, the community's disappointment, and even, you know, the reason why they're angry or upset at the announcement of Immortal and not getting confirmation of anything else. You know, of course there is the multiple games, multiple projects, but that could literally mean anything. If you don't clearly state we're working on Diablo 4, people nowadays, that despite all of the evidence that, hey, we're getting the Diablo 4 announcement, you know, at this BlizzCon, people are like, I'll believe it when I see it. After Immortal, I don't trust Blizzard anymore. And it's just, it's like there's being disappointed, there's being upset about how those things, and then there's just being ridiculous, which I feel that there's a lot of people that still have, you know, far too unreasonable in their expectations, or they're just looking, they're just trying to make Blizzard the bad guy, you know, in any situation, when they're still making Diablo 4. Like, you know, you don't have to play Diablo Immortal, and Diablo Immortal isn't taking anything away from Diablo 4.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like
it's a lot of misnomers, so to speak. And but it's like, because like I was saying, like when I was reflecting, a lot of what you were saying went into that. I'm thinking like, okay, like how can I not make the community the bad guy? Because I don't want to be like one of these people that kind of blames the community. But I always try to like, always want to like are we like the source of some of this as the developers was? And I always believe that there's always a share of blame. As much as we may not like it, like we have to be adults in the room. We have to kind of figure this out.
Yeah.
So the way I kind of almost rectified, and not like I'm trying really hard, but like I think the way I really rectified a lot of the frustration and upsetness from the community's next point is because I reflected back, as I stated, on what I expected from BlizzCon in the beginning. I said if they're going to announce anything, it was going to be Diablo 4 and a Diablo 3 DLC. You could have asked anybody else. They could have said D2 remaster, you know, a big patch for Diablo 3, and maybe a teaser, an image, something for Diablo 4. And then
I think specifically mine was Diablo 2 remaster and zero chance at a Diablo mobile game.
Yeah, like if you.
It also zero chance at Diablo 4.
Yeah, so when I started thinking about, like, okay, you would have asked about 100 different Diablo 3 players at the time what they would expect, you probably would have gotten 100 different answers. And I think that's the reason why there was such the outrage, because a Diablo mobile game was on nobody's radar. Even if people say they thought about it was a meme, it was a joke, it was like, yeah, even if it was that, I wouldn't want it. I'm just joking about it. And because there was nothing else, there was no patch content, there was no season information drop. Well, seasons weren't even announced. It was the week afterwards, and there's even backstories about that. There was no major improvements to Diablo 3. When we saw Warcraft 3 Reforged go up, it almost kind of threw away hopes for Diablo 2 remaster, because like what, they're doing 2 at the same time? If it's classic games, they only really have the ability to do one at a time. So it's like there was nothing for the current game. There was no hope for D2 remaster to calm down those people who just want to remaster. There was no Diablo 4 to speak of, so there's nothing for the future of the franchise, and we're being saddled with this mobile game, which, to the people who say it looks like a reskinned game, or if anything, even if it was a unique engine and it had its own abilities, it looks like it's borrowing a lot from Diablo 3 in aspects.
I mean, that's just going to be one of those ones, you know, people are going to vilify things that they don't like, and no one was there for a Diablo mobile game, and so if that's what they're getting, you know, they're obviously going to be upset about that, and so they're going to find anything and everything they can to deride the title. It's not just about not liking it. I have to justify
have to break it down
why I don't like it. So it's going to be, it's a reskin of this game, or they're just reusing these graphics from Diablo 3. You know, that they try to vilify it as much as they can in order to kind of like solidify their position and reaffirm their feelings.
Echo chamber, essentially.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And
so it's like, it's like one of those ones where it's like, I guess it's for me, it's always been, well, if I don't like something and it doesn't impact me, well, I'm okay with accepting, well, that game's not for me, that feature's not for me. I'll go in and I'll continue to play Diablo 3, type thing. But for some people that's not enough, and I think that's where you begin to start drawing the line, where you have to go out of your way to try and ruin other people's experience because you personally don't like it, instead of allowing others to just enjoy it because they liked it.
Yeah, so when you put all those factors together, like someone like myself, like I don't actually remember being, truthfully and honestly, I'm not downplaying it, like I don't remember actually being angry or frustrated, maybe a little bit disappointed, because I really felt, I mean, come on, I made the hype train image and I plan on editing it and making it again for this year, like I was on that hype train, but I mean, I've had access to the community managers and developers for the last 7 years now. I've had that relationship. I was at BlizzCon. I played the game just as you did. I have that privilege and access that outside of maybe like 50 to 75 content creators at max for our game, because our game is hugely successful, but it is tight as far as community members are concerned. it's hard to penetrate that echo chamber sometimes. So when I look back on people who say like, oh, we didn't get D2 remastered, didn't get this, and we got this, I actually said, I actually understand where you're coming from, honestly. Like, I really do. But when I look at Immortal, and I look at what, even just the little tidbits that we had, and for me, after writing that development hell for that thesis of where Diablo 3 is and where it could be brought in the future for Diablo 4, going like, we need Immortal. Because Immortal is actually pushing the franchise forward. It's actually doing something considerably different. In the aspect of, like, raids were never part of the game. Dungeons were never part of the game. Now it's going to be hard differentiating a action RPG raid or dungeon from a MMO one. And for the explanation, they have to make it to where it doesn't feel like you're doing a WoW raid. That the game is still soloable, but then why can't you do a dungeon soloable? It's a thin line to walk, so to speak. Even if you make it for people, you have to. You basically kind of you're bridging a weird line between an action RPG where a solo person can do it versus you're required to go into a 4-person dungeon to get better gear. It's a thin line when you're kind of going from one genre to another.
I mean, that is going to be one of those big questions, is if they do go like an MMO light route, say trying to take a little bit off of Destiny, like a looter shooter, is it acceptable to have a mass market ARPG that does have non-soloable content that is going to require grouping and such? It's like, what can you do to push ARPGs forward instead of just continually, like rehashing Diablo 2? What can you do in order to like really take a step forward in the genre and start getting risky? Diablo Immortal in that respect, like you were saying, is something that's really nice because it's something that it's mobile. It's so different already. They can take a lot of risks. They can take a lot of chances with that. And, because they are kind of swapping to a different, different market, maybe that's something that like it's a risk that they're willing to take. And that they can take that to see how it performs.
Yeah, and I guess again, because I did that article where I was really thinking like, because the biggest thing in Diablo 3 right now is this like diversity in builds in general, like taking skills and runes and gear and sets versus legendaries, and you kind of encompass all that into build diversity in the broadest aspect. And look how games like PoE have done it with their mass skill tree and skill gems, and you look at Wilson, how they're doing their twist, and how Last Epoch is doing with their twist, and how Grim Dawn has done it. And you kind of look how those games are doing it, and you're wondering. And then I reflect back on some of the skills they showed us in Immortal. It was like when they showed us the wizard's teleportability. I forget the name of the. If you've played Heroes of the Storm, specifically Diablo, one of his abilities was you shoot balls of fire radiating out from you, and then after about half a second, they all come back towards you. So you can cast it, and you can run to a hero, and then all the balls come back to you, hit it, and then they all hit that target. So it's the same concept with the wizard, except they're lightning. And the way they demonstrated like a basic comboing was you could cast it, hit a whole bunch of enemies next to you, and you teleport next to like the leader of a champion pack or a higher up elite, and all the balls come back to you and they all smack and really chunkify that elite. It sounds really simple, but when you think about Diablo 3 right now, it doesn't really exist. I mean, I know you have the Monk's Cyclone Strike and EP, but that it's almost there, but it's not the same feel. And then the next example was the Monk's I forget if they call it lashing tail kick, or if they kind of switch it, but it was basically, a kick ability for the monk. Except if you hit a mob or were close enough to a wall in say a keeps level, for instance, the kick would keep on going. So you would be able, if you were really good, you would
do a little
pong.
bounce back, yeah.
You do like a ping pong. So if you got really good at that, you can do it once and hit an enemy, hit a wall, hit another enemy. Like you could be like really embracing that whole martial arts aspect, like really bringing the fantasy alive in that aspect. That was just the one ability that they showed off. And then I think the best example of how they're pushing the skills forward in Immortal is going back to the wizard. Is they showed off the ice crystal ability. Basically, the wizard showed off this ice crystal. It would pulse, do I think it pulsed to do cold damage, and would slow down enemies within a certain radius of it, and after a couple of seconds it would explode to do a certain amount of damage. But it had a native interaction with Ray of Frost, so you could, if there was a bunch of mobs that were naturally slower, you could cast the ice crystal kind of in front of the pack. It would be doing damage, slowing them down, and then you could channel a Ray of Frost into the ice crystal, and then the ice crystal would fracture the Ray of Frost, and you would actually be able to hit enemies within a certain range of the ice crystal.
It turned a single target skill into an AoE.
It turned it into an AoE. Now, again, if you're just hearing this for the first time, say, okay, what's the big deal? If you go back to Diablo 3, that doesn't exist, because you have to remember that's just two skills interacting. There's no there's no set component altering the skills. There's no legendary powers altering the skills. There's no skill runes dictating that this is the way they interact because you selected these skills. This is the native interaction of these skills. That is going back to the skills of each class at the fundamental level and retooling them and pushing them forward, which I think if there was ever a hill to die on to defend Immortal, it would be that and that alone. Because if that gets lost, or if that wasn't celebrated and pushed forward to Diablo 4 in some way or manner, I feel we would lose something potentially really special. And Immortal, for what it is in its own box, is a great game. I hope the microtransaction model doesn't KO it off the beginning, because there's a lot of lore in there, because just the timeline it is, and unfortunately we're not going to have enough. Well, maybe we'll go into that briefly, but it's just, I feel once people let themselves cool down, and hopefully Diablo 4 is announced this BlizzCon, people will be able to look with Immortal with a fresh set of eyes. I'll be like, okay, fine, Immortal, it's just there, whatever. D4, new shiny object, we can look at and potentially pick apart because, well, we know our community. But I really hope that doesn't get lost. Like, I hope, like, what that dev team is doing is being looked on with favorable eyes, and almost like an internal challenge, like, wow, that's actually pretty good. We have to equal that, if not do better, for Diablo 4. I hope in the simplest aspects, that's how it's viewed upon.
Yeah, the inter-team, competition. Who's going to make the better Diablo game?
Yeah. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I don't want to abandon what I had thought, but I want to make sure we keep this a little bit under wraps. So we'll make it not so quick fire, but I'll answer a question. You kind of give me like a 2 to 3 minute answer, because this is lore, and lore takes forever. But basically, the way I was going to have my segment was not the lore of the game, because you've talked about that, and it's something that's been actually touched upon. I know Riker's done his series, and then he had to stop for all the build guys, but he hopes to get back to it. I actually wanted to focus on Diablo 3, Immortal, and the rumored Netflix series. So focusing around those three, I guess, how do you feel the lore was handled for Diablo 3? And yeah, just your general thoughts about how the lore is handled for Diablo 3.
I have to answer this in 2 minutes.
You can have 3. Bridge.
Oh wow, 3. Nice, 50% extra. Okay, for the lore, and lore is not always synonymous with story. I think that they did a pretty good job with Diablo 3 and going through and continuing to further build the world of Diablo, the world of Sanctuary, and bringing more of a point to the whole Diablo franchise, with settling upon the World Stone and the Eternal Conflict, and kind of like bringing that to the forefront. There's some stuff, of course, that knowledge from outside of the game, where they originally wanted to take the story and it didn't go the direction that they wanted it to, so they then had to redo it. And so instead of being about the World Stone, it's about the Black Soul Stone, and so like little changes and such. You can kind of tell there was a little bit of a disconnection at some parts in the story itself. But I think as far as the lore goes, they did a really good job going through and pushing that aspect of it forward. There are also some things that I appreciate, like Tyrael becoming human. That's a very, and his reason for doing so. It's like if I have to follow, he's the aspect of justice, and if I have to follow doing the right thing is hindered by following the law, then the law is wrong, and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then deciding to become human, and that was something that I felt was a very, a very interesting, character development. And sometimes, for good stories, bad things are going to happen to your favorite characters. Tyrael will always be an angel to me. I'm always going to love his angelic form, more than him being human. But him being human was a very good art in Tyrael's story, and I'll be interested in seeing where it goes from here. Though I think if they make him back into an angel, as much as I would love to see it, would just cheapen the whole story of Diablo 3. Yeah. But for the most part, I do like where the lore itself went. Obviously, there's some story-driven questions of how they handled Cain's death, how Leah fit into the whole story. That could have been handled better. But I think that they made a lot of amends with Reaper of Souls and trying to go back to the gritty, dark gothic feel of the original Diablo, like the kind of more in tone with some of the other Diablo games. Though I guess the biggest question that I have afterwards is, like, Pandora's box with the Nephalem has been thrown open. Where do you go from here and still have a threat? It is just it's like your character is just so super overpowered that there's literally not even death could stop them. What's the next challenge?
Power scale.
Yeah, it's basically it's like one of those things. Like, we already beat Boo. What's what's next? Type thing. Yeah. And so I think that they kind of push themselves into a corner a little bit, and I'll be interested in seeing what they do in order to tone down the Nephalem and the power level of everything going forward.
So with that, where do you think? We're actually going to go backwards. What are you looking forward to, lore-wise, or lore-wise, story-wise? I mean, they're different, but they're intertwined. Like, one can kind of help dictate the other. For Immortal, with that 30-year gap, because it's a couple years after the end of Lord of Destruction, and it leads all the way up to Diablo 3.
Yeah, there's a 20-year gap between Tyrael destroying the World Stone and the beginning of Diablo 3. Immortal takes place, 5 years after the destruction of the World Stone, so 15 years before Diablo 3. And that's where they're kind of setting it. And one of the things that they sold Immortal on is it's just going to be kind of like this big open world that you get to go through, explore, and learn more about Sanctuary. You get to learn more about it. And that's something that has my little nerd heart jumping of joy, because I'm going to love to be able to go to all these places and learn more about its history and the people, and what are all these different cultures and such. One of the places that they showed off that was actually in the demo itself takes place near a community, called I believe it's the Port of Rakis, which, just from that, it's like, oh, what the hell is the Port of Rakis? Well, Rakis was the founder of Westmarch, so obviously we know that this is some sort of far eastern trading outpost that the city country of Westmarch had used, possibly as a jumping point, for a fleet of trading vessels to like maybe trade with Scovos, or to further go over to Chaldeum or Gelkul. And so it's a lot of little things that when I hear terms like this, those are the things that go off in my mind. That they're the tiny little things that to the mass general public might mean nothing. It's just a name. But to me, I can't wait to learn more about it. Like, is this actually, was this one of like Westmarch is major trading points with Scovos, or just a little stop on the way to Chaldeum? What is it? I want to know. Yeah. But that seems to be that the main thing that they're going to do with Immortal is to fill in the gaps. And that also then at that point to me means, what are they going to do with Diablo 4 if Immortal's going to come out before Diablo 4, and it's going to be almost like a stepping stone or laying down the foundations? How big are they going to go with the story? How big are they going to go with the lore in opening up the world with Diablo 4 if Immortal's what we're getting first?
Yeah. So with that, you kind of hit the tail with where I was going next. In regards to Diablo 4, Diablo Next, copyright yourself, 2017. I guess I don't want to pose the question as where do you think the lore or the story is going to go, but where would you like it to go? Like,
I've been trying to put together my feelings, because it's a question that I actually get a lot. It's like, well, what do you think that they're going to do with the story of Diablo 4? And it's like one of those ones where, it's what was the old adage, like the first step to like wisdom or knowledge is to realize you know nothing. Is so like literally, like I always use Diablo 3 itself as an example, where after they announced Diablo 3, up until the release of the game, they had been hounding the World Stone. We've got, the Sin War trilogy is going through and building up the World Stone, and then it doesn't even get mentioned in Diablo 3, and is like an offhand topic in Reaper of Souls. So obviously they can go, different directions and be working on something for years and then drop it, like shortly before release, or, shortly before, probably a couple of years before release, in order to write the full story for D3. But it's just like one of those ones, you have no idea where it's going to go or where they're coming from, or what it is, what question is the writer or the creative director wanting to answer with the game. You have no idea. But so my thoughts about like the story for Diablo 4 are more in terms of setting, or questions that they're looking to answer, and like some of the things where they're still continuing to focus on the eternal conflict from the comic that we saw, that even though it's now since been canceled, seemed to be talking about the origins of Sanctuary, the origins of the Nephalem and the humanity itself. And that's one of those things that I'm looking more towards, that they might be going with the story, that we're probably going to have another time skip, because that's going to be the easiest solution to solving the problem of the gods walking around Sanctuary, that the Nephalem themselves are still mortal. So 50 years in the future, they're all dead.
Yep.
They died of old age, or they take Android Saga. Oh yeah, Goku had a heart attack. It's just it's like yeah, just cancer, dead, died. And so I think that there's going to be a time skip in order to go through and solve the problem of the Nephalem. Sure, it is. Is it a lazy way out? Maybe. You can handle it well, but I feel as if it's a nice and simplistic way of handling the question of the Nephalem and the literal gods that are walking around the world right now, to allow a new threat to come and take place that could actually challenge the followers. Another way that they could, in order to bring back the World Stone, is a lot of Metzin's comments prior to the release of Diablo 3 is like the World Stone is more of like a force of nature than it is a physical object. We just saw the physical piece of the World Stone get destroyed, but how can you actually destroy the essence of creation itself? What if someone
you start getting into like Twisted Nether, Great Beyond
territory
where it's like, oh god,
what
save
happens?
me now.
What happens if someone reforms the World Stone? This is something that we're going to learn a little bit more of in Immortal, because part of the story for that game is hunting down corrupted shards of the World Stone that were scattered all over Sanctuary. And so that's something that they could do where, the World Stone begins to reform. And part of the function of the World Stone was to limit the powers of the Nephalem and gradually allow them to gain those abilities back over time. And that was one of those ones where it's kind of, you go back a couple thousand years, during like the Mage Clan Wars, where it's just, the mages fighting against one another, and then they're at their wits' end trying to fight back against, a small army of demons. To now the forces of hell are literally opening up into the world, and a small band of warriors are able to, fight them, without any issue. You reinstate the World Stone and its kind of like power limiter on the Nephalem again. Now all of a sudden things get darker. Things, that fight for survival has a little bit more meaning. Because also one of the other things that not a lot of people want to acknowledge at the end of Reaper of Souls, the vast majority of the human population on Sanctuary is now dead because of Malthael. Like, we don't know numbers, but like at a minimum, if you look at what they were going through and saying, like with Westmarch, we're probably at like literally half the world, like at a minimum, is dead. At the end of Reaper of Souls. Sure, you killed Malthael, but
the damage is done.
The damage is severe. You're gonna go into like the Necromancers, the Necromancer storyline. Their base of operations, their headquarters, was like a subterranean city. Like they're all dead. Like there's only they make it seem as if there's like a handful of necromancers that are left in existence. But like everyone that was in their subterranean city, which I wish Blizzard would give us a name for, instead of just saying like the home of the necromancers is a subterranean city, like they're all dead. So they're having to rebuild the order. And then you see like the one little thing where Malthael sends the Black Soulstone to Chaldeum. Even though we go there like in adventure mode, is that canon? Or is everyone in Chaldeum dead? We don't know. These are going to be great questions to go through and answer. If say the game takes place not that long after Diablo 3 and you're just some no-name nobody, you could be going through a major town and there's no one there. Malthael killed all of them.
Yeah. Basically, all these ghost towns in Sanctuary. It's an uneasy thought.
But it opens up. That's like the perfect opener to any D&D campaign or any type of action adventure. Is like the treasure hunters. That was the whole story of Diablo 1. Oh, you heard that there's some awesome treasure and amazing magical artifacts that are down in this buried underneath the caverns beneath the I want to say Citadel, but it's not the Citadel, the cathedral. There's all this treasure down there, and your story is, you're a treasure hunter, looking to go through and like score some riches. Yeah. Down there, and so that could be the opening to Diablo 4. You're just some guy off the street. You're not really concerned about the forces of heaven and hell. You just want to go and like loot some treasure in this town that Malthael decimated, 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, it's all a wondrous ride. We're on it, and we don't know where it's gonna wind up.
But,
yeah. So, with that, we have reached the closing of the show. There we go. I found that word. I pulled it out. So, just to start with the outro. If you would like to follow the show, you can go to the website at scytheandshield.com. If you would like to email the show, you can do that at scytheandshield@gmail.com. if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, that's at Scythe and Shield. I did good, folks. I got everything all nice and easy for you. And if you would like to join the Discord, you can go to the website and click one of the 35 links. That's a little over exaggerated. This is 2. They get to the Discord where you can join the community, as well as pose guests you like to see on the show, as well as pose potential questions for those guests for the show. And if I pick those questions or guests, I'll try my best to shout you out on the show itself. And lastly, if you want to follow myself on Twitter, that would be at DreadScythe. Neinball, where can people find you, find your show, all those wonderful things? Plug away.
Oh, yep. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at Neinball Gamer on Twitter. And then, of course, go through, check out. I have the long-standing Diablo podcast, the Westmarch Workshop. Just do iTunes or Google search for Westmarch Workshop in order to go and find where you can subscribe to that. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, like Google Audio, like there's like a dozen places that we're listed at. Your podcast listening of choice. It's also on YouTube. You can find video versions of all the podcasts. And I also stream it like every other Wednesday night. I try to stream it. Work schedule's been getting in the way of that one at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. Just do a search for there, and you'll find the live streams of the Westmarch Workshop. You can follow the Westmarch Workshop on Twitter at the WM Workshop, and that way you can find links to everything else. And also you can find me at DiabloFans.com. I'm one of the content writers over there. You get to see me talk about lore and the Netflix series and a whole bunch of other stuff that I like to discuss. I like to talk about Diablo a lot.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, you are everywhere now.
Try to be.
Yeah. All right. So again, thank you everyone for listening to the show. Joining me on the first Ignoreal Guest episode. Neinball, thank you.
That word again.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me for the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And we're over 2 hours? Yay. Just like the old times.
Just under.
Yep.
But all in all, and remember, folks, keep hacking and slashing those demons. Good night, and slay well, my friends.